Good morning, my friends. For those who are here and those on YouTube, my name is Ming, and welcome to another perfect day in paradise. I'm delighted today to introduce renowned meditation teacher, Shinzen Young. I've been a huge fan of Shinzen since discovering his classic audio publication, The Science of Enlightenment, which was edited by that guy over there, Michael. Shinzen was able to give very clear, rational, and understandable explanations of meditation and enlightenment. And I think he handled the topic of enlightenment better than anybody else I know. The Science of Enlightenment remains one of my favorite audiobooks of all time. And I think you're just an amazing teacher. Thank you. Another thing that impressed me about Shinzen is that he is learned in all three major traditions of Buddhism. And he is one of very few people I know who can expertly navigate different schools of Buddhist philosophies and practices and distill the best of them. And finally, he is comfortable with modern science, and like myself, he wants to integrate meditation and science in a way that is useful to real people in the real world. And after the talk today, Shinzen will lead a meditation session downstairs, and please feel free to follow us after that. And with that, please give a warm welcome to Shinzen Young.
So my name is Shinzen, S-H-I-N-Z-E-N, and that's not the name I was born with, but it's the name that I've had ever since 1970, when I became a Buddhist monk in Japan. I spent a number of years in different Asian monasteries. So that's how I got the Japanese Buddhist name. For those of you that read Chinese characters, I'm here at Google, so I can actually do something like this and have probably a fourth of the audience be able to read it. It would be Zhen Shan in Mandarin pronunciation. Those are the two characters, but in Sino-Japanese it's read Shinzen. So that's my name, and my favorite thing in the world is to do what I am now doing, which is to talk about meditation to people that are interested in this, particularly to talk to people that have a technical type or science type background, who would tend to think in those terms about the world, because that's very much the way I think. And as Meng mentioned, I'd like to sort of bring together what I consider to be the best of the East and the best of the West. The best of the East I see as the internal science and internal technology of systematic meditation. The best of the West is the combination of mathematics and empirical observation and reasoning that we call the scientific method. A good 30 years ago, it occurred to me, if we look at the history of science, very often major breakthroughs occur when two existing branches of science are suddenly seen as having a relationship, and they're able to complement each other, spin off of each other. For example, the melding of algebraic thinking and geometrical thinking that was necessary with Cartesian coordinates and so forth for the development of calculus. We had like geometry and arithmetic, algebra coming together, suddenly seeing a new relationship between them, branching off into a whole new type of mathematics. Well, it occurred to me that at a broader scale, if we took all of human history, the most impressive peaks that I see are the peak of Western science and the peak of Eastern internal science. What if these two could find a natural connection? What kind of stunning and interesting new developments might happen in human history broadly that might benefit large numbers of human beings? Those are the kinds of questions that I've sort of devoted my life to. So that's my area of interest. What I'd like to do this afternoon is give you just a brief overview of meditation broadly through the world, and then narrow in on one type of meditation, which is mindfulness practice, which is what I'm most interested in. Try to show you some parallels between that and the way that science works broadly, and what that might mean for our future, and then open it up for questions. My favorite thing in the world is to address your questions about meditation, about practice, and so forth. So that's sort of the agenda. I'm going to try to squeeze that into a very short period of time. So let's imagine that you were to decide that you wanted to do meditation practice. So you're going to do meditation, and your teacher has told you, I want you to spend a half hour each morning focusing on the sensation of your breath when you're at the tip of your nose as it goes in and out here. And when your attention wanders, which it will, just bring it back. So your teacher is giving you that exercise. You start to do that. What is going to be the first thing that you're likely to notice as you attempt to do this each morning? What do you think? Oh, by the way, I like to take questions. I also like to ask. Active learning. What do you think is going to be some of the first things you're going to notice as you're attempting to do this seemingly simple exercise? You're going to notice that it's maybe simple in instruction, but not so simple to carry out. And why is that? What's going to happen? You focused on your breath, and then a second later, what's going to happen? You're somewhere else. One place you might be is what you just mentioned. Your own internal talk distracts you from the physical sensation of the breath. What else might distract you? Other kinds of physical sensations. The sensation of the breath will be neutral, perhaps pleasant, but you could have itches and aches and pressures and pains on other kinds of physical discomforts that might distract you. What else might distract you from your breath? What other category of sensory experience?
External noises.
You could have external sounds that would distract you. So you could have the internal sound of your own self-talk. You could have the external sound of the world. You could have physical type sensations other than your breath. Anything else might come up? We're assuming, well, what if your eyes are open? We don't assume that you have to have your eyes closed to meditate. If your eyes are open, external sight's going to distract you. If your eyes are closed, that takes out external sight. But there's still a couple more sensory categories that could come up to distract you from the breath. Well, taste, although we might consider that to be a physical type sensation on the body. Well, do we only think in internal talk? Might there be another modality of thought? Mind's eye. We hear the world externally, but we also hear ourself as self-talk. We see the world externally, but we also see ourself, the world, as mental pictures. In fact, we store the imago mundi, the image of the world and all the parts of the world, in a subliminal processing area that I call image space. The surface of image space may activate, giving us mental pictures. So we could be distracted by external visual experience of the world, or we could be distracted by internal visual experience of visual thinking. Let's call that image activity. So talk could distract you, image could distract you. Now, sensations in the body, most of them are just physical in origin, but how about when you're having an emotional experience? When you have an emotional experience, if it's intense, if you were to subtract image activity and talk activity. Follow what I'm saying? If you subtract visual thinking and auditory thinking from your emotional experience, what will you be left with? Will the emotional experience completely vanish, or is there a component that will be present? A sensory component.
I mean, you experience physical.
Absolutely. You get body sensations associated with emotion. It seems to me that body sensations that are associated with emotion are the real juice that drives human emotions. So it seems to me we should have a word in English that means the body component of an emotional experience. But actually, we don't have a word that means precisely that. We only have that phrase, the body component of an emotional experience. But let's just, for convenience sake, so that we can have some technical vocabulary to describe our subjective world, let's arbitrarily agree to use the English word feel to mean the body component of emotional experience. So this is a much more narrow sense of the word feel. Ordinarily, feel is anything in your body is feel. But let's just call that let's use that for the emotional part, and let's call any physical sensation touch, wherever it may be. This gives us a trimodal model for consciousness. We've got somatic experience, visual experience, auditory experience, and some of those some visual experiences related to thinking, some auditory experiences related to thinking, and some somatic experience is the juice of our emotions. So the feel and the image and the talk sort of are a way of analyzing our subjective world. On the other hand, our objective world, external sights, external sounds, and physical type sensations in the body. This gives us a little classificatory system, trimodal, bilateral. If we want to think of two sides of experience, a subjective side and an objective side, we've sort of got somatic, visual, auditory, and the somewhat more subjective side is mental image, is emotion, is feel, image, talk. Okay, and then we've got the touch, sight, sounds of the world. So when in giving you that meditation exercise of, okay, I want you to focus on the sensation of your breath, and when things distract you, come back, we're giving you a special kind of touch, a particular physical sensation to focus on. And what happens is all this other stuff comes up and it's going to distract you. Particularly, you will discover that feel, image, talk will distract you. You start running fantasies. You have mental pictures. You have the video. You have the audio. You have the pleasant feel sensation in the body of being entertained, etc. And you're off into what neuroscientists call the default attentional network. You're off into memory, plan, fantasy, problem solving. That's the feel, image, talk system proactively going on its own. On the other hand, moment by moment, that same system reacts to the touches, sights, and sounds of the world, interestingly. So all these distractions come up, and you follow your teacher's instruction. Each time you're pulled into mental picture, internal talk, physical or emotional sensation, external sound, external sight, you gently bring your attention back to your breath. Now, what do you think will happen if you keep doing this over and over again over a period of a number of years? Do you think that at some point it's going to be easier to maintain a focus on the breath? Yeah, it will, with practice. You've developed a skill set or a kind of strength by systematic practice. Now, do you think that that taste of high concentration that you develop during formal practice on the breath, do you think that that can be generalized? That you would have to learn concentration for every other sensory situation? Or that the skill that you developed with that one object would immediately generalize and the same flavors of concentration could come on and be applied to other objects? Well, I'll give you the answer. Many of you are shaking your head. It's immediately generalizable. So it wouldn't matter if we asked you initially to focus on an external sound or an internal mantra talk or some visualization or a pleasant emotion. We could ask you anything. We could take any sensory experience, ask you to focus on it, give you the simple instruction, attention wanders, bring it back, attention wanders, bring it back. After a period of time, initially you would be very frustrated. You would have what I call a sobering insight. The sobering insight you would realize how distracted you really are. But that's actually good. That's good because most people will never realize that, and they'll have to live their entire lives in a scattered state because they don't realize that they're scattered. So anybody here like T.S. Eliot, the poet? My favorite of all favorite poets. Okay, he's got a great line in the Four Quartets describing the situation of most human beings. He says, distracted from distraction by distraction. Okay, most people are so distracted that they don't even realize that they're living their lives 24/7 until perhaps just a few hours before they die, and they have no choice, and they finally become focused. Most people will be half alive and half dead because they'll never experience a moment of high focus in their life. However, if you did a meditation practice, and it wouldn't matter what practice you did, it could be TM, it could be Christian centering prayer, it could be Sufi zikr, it could be Buddhist mindfulness, or just sitting zazen, whatever. If you did a practice, your attention would wander egregiously for a while, and then if you kept up with it, it wouldn't wander as much. And you'd start to get a taste of a highly concentrated state. That highly concentrated taste would grow in two orthogonal dimensions. One dimension is depth, the other is breadth or wideness. So what do I mean by depth? The concentrated state would become more and more and more concentrated. Deeper and deeper and deeper, more and more intense. It would begin to affect your physiology in a radical way, measurable changes in your brain waves, in your galvanic skin response. If you go to mindandlife.org, that's probably your one-stop stopping for the science of meditation. The name of the organization is mindandlife.org. If you want to see the kind of research that backs up what I'm saying. But one direction of growth is it's going to get more and more and more powerful. And you will discover that any ordinary activity done in a highly concentrated state has two characteristics. It's more fulfilling subjectively, and you perform better objectively. Okay. I just laid a bombshell on you, okay? That was very innocent sounding. I said any human activity done in a highly concentrated state is going to have two characteristics. It's going to be subjectively more fulfilling, and you're going to objectively be performing better if it's a performance type situation. Now, since I also said that the concentrated state would become deeper and deeper and deeper, that the implication here is that your fulfillment, even in ordinary type activities, is going to become more and more and more profound as time goes on, and also your objective ability to perform is going to improve simply as a function of concentration power alone. This was discovered by the positive psychology people many decades ago at Chicago, at the University of Chicago. You can look at the research of a man named Mike Csikszentmihalyi. It has a Hungarian spelling, help me out, C-I-K, S-C-S-I-K, S-Z-E-N-T-M-I-H-A-I-L-L-E, I think, is how to spell his name. Anyway, something like that. What he showed through very careful testing is that there's an intrinsic reward in a high concentrated state, just the concentration alone. You may wonder how Zen monks can live in what seems to be a very bleak environment, or Christian monks and nuns. Okay, typical task you do in a Christian monastery for nuns, maybe stamp out communion wafers. For monks, repetitive physical labor. Well, it looks sort of hellish, okay? It's like the same boring thing day after day after day. Maybe you're in silence. It seems like a very bleak environment, yet they're very joyous, extremely happy. Why? Because everything is being done in a state of high concentration. By the way, people raised in the West, when I ask this question, almost no one knows the answer to it, which is sad. What is the traditional word used in Christianity for the state of high concentration that develops in meditation? It's a related concept, but they have actually a specific word. It's recollection, meaning not to remember, but to collect the attention back, recollegere in Latin. The traditional generic term in Buddhism and Hinduism is samadhi. In Hebrew, it's called kavanah, which means to direct your attention. There's a Jewish meditative tradition called Kabbalah. They talk about kavanah. In Arabic, it's called zikr, which literally means to remember, but has a specific meaning within the Sufi, Islamic, Muslim meditation of being highly concentrated. So in all of the major religions of the world, there's a meditating core, and in each one of those traditions, there's a technical generic term for the state of high concentration in bringing about the effects that I just mentioned. Now, you remember I said it will grow, it meaning the taste of concentration, will grow in two dimensions. One is it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper and affect your physiology eventually. The second dimension is it's going to get broader and broader. What does that mean? Well, when you first learn to meditate, you'll barely taste a little bit of concentration during a period of formal sitting. And then at the end of the period of formal sitting, that will dissipate. But then as the years go on, you will notice that it comes on in daily life without you having to try. A momentum from the formal practice starts to carry over. That's the dimension, the horizontal spreading of the concentrated state until a figure ground reversal takes place. When you begin to meditate, you have your day, and that's the ground, and within that, upon that ground, there is a thing called meditation that you do, and then there's your day. At some point, a figure ground reversal takes place. There is the meditative state, and that's going on 24/7, even in your dreams. If you're a meditator in waking life, you continue to meditate automatically in your dreams because you're the same person you are in your dreams. So all your waking or REM sleep hours, all your waking and dreaming hours, every place that's not just unconscious with dreamless sleep, you're in a meditative state. So it's now seeping out into daily life, and life is starting to occur within the recollected state, within the state of samadhi. Now, you now will never be bored again. I remember my whole goal in life when I was a kid is I never want to waste a minute. So I wanted to study 24/7. But because I thought, oh, well, then I'm always using my time productively. But then you discover that there's more to life than just reading books. But I still never wanted to waste any time. Well, it was like such a revelation after a few years of meditation practice in Asia, when I realized I'll never be bored again. I'll never waste a minute of my life again, because I'm either doing something intrinsically productive, or I am just sitting around doing something that would ordinarily be boring, but I'm in a meditative state and I'm honing my meditation skills and I'm getting high off of just being in the zone. So it's like your entire life changes because you now have this sort of secret way of, I hate to use the term because people are in recovery, it sort of has a bad connotation, but the secret way of being high all the time. But it's not a drug high. It's a being relevant high, because concentration is defined as the ability to attend to what you deem relevant at a given instant. So you might first learn it with something fairly irrelevant, like just, okay, I'm going to focus on breath or a mantra sound or something. But then as a general skill, it allows you to have a complete experience of whatever you are experiencing in life. So if I were to say, I've got good news, I can add 50 years to your life. You give me 20 minutes every morning and I'll add 50 years to your life. Do the math. Sounds like a good deal, right? Well, I don't have a process that's going to that's going to increase your life additively by putting years on it. But what I do have, what is feasible, is I have a process which will multiply the scale at which you live each moment of ordinary life. It will literally stretch the scale, because if you're twice as concentrated, in a sense, you're living twice as big. And if that's on autopilot, you're not having to effort it. In other words, you've elevated your base level of concentration, you've doubled it or tripled it by formal practice. Now you're going to get to live your life 2 or 3 times as big as you would have otherwise. So even if you only live 50 years, you will live as big as living 100 years, roughly speaking. And that is feasible. That is absolutely feasible through training. So these are some of the stages that you would pass through if you were to undertake a meditation practice and continue with it. At first, a lot of frustration. You'd have that sobering insight, oh my God, my attention is wandering all the time. It's like the proverbial wild monkey that's been stung by a bee. It's just like all over the place. But then with time, during formal practice, you start to taste a little concentration, and then you start to taste a lot of concentration, and it starts to automatically suffuse into daily life. And it's just there for you. You have elevated your base level of concentration 2 or 3-fold. That by base level, we mean when you're not trying, how focused are you? And so now you're getting to live life 2 or 3 times as big. You've got this edge that the average person doesn't have that helps you be more fully alive and also more objectively effective. So that's pretty good. But there are other dimensions to the learning process in meditation. As your concentration is growing, you start to be able to detect things that you would not have detected otherwise. Your sensory clarity is increasing. And as a result of that clarity, you start to get epiphanies. You start to get aha experiences that you wouldn't get otherwise. You could investigate yourself, you could introspect with a scattered mind and get some surface psychological insights. But when you introspect or investigate your experience with a highly focused mind, that is equivalent to looking with a microscope. So usually self-investigation is done with the naked eye. That means that the person does not have high concentration skills. The results that come from that kind of self-investigation are okay, but they tend to be superficial and personal and psychological. If you do an internal investigation with a high state of concentration, the insights that you get may be personal and psychological, but you'll also begin to get deeper insights. As you know, in science, we're interested in things that are deep and broad. We like generality and we like depth. So insights that a person gets when they look into themselves, the more important ones are deeper, they're hidden, they're not evident on the surface. You need a high laser-like concentration to look in order to detect them. They're deeper and they're also broader. You get insights that relate not just to you as a person, but to any person. Or for that matter, you get insights that relate to any sentient being at all. And they're highly non-trivial insights. What do I mean? Well, let me give you some examples. So another thing that's going to happen to you when you first sit there and meditate, somebody already mentioned it, in addition to your attention wandering, you're going to start to get physical discomfort. Now, true or false, every single person listening to this talk sooner or later is going to have to deal with significant physical discomfort unless there's some very weird quirk that you die quickly right after this talk and you never had to, okay? Sooner or later, we're going to have to deal with physical discomfort in this life. And is it highly likely, okay, we've got what, 20 some people in this room. What's the probability, maybe more, what's the probability that within the next year, at least one of you is going to have physical discomfort be the salient issue of your life for a while? I'd say, yeah, it could happen. All you have to do is leave this talk, slip on a banana peel out there at the refreshment counter, hit the wrong place in your back, and you know what? The next 30 years will be dominated by one theme and one theme only, which is my pain. That's the sword of Damocles under which all human beings live their lives. Unless you know something, unless you know from your own experience that the experience of physical discomfort and the experience of suffering due to physical discomfort are not the same experience. Okay? Remember I said that as you look within yourself, you'll begin to see things that you couldn't see otherwise because a certain clarity component is entering in addition to the concentration. What most people that have done an industrial strength meditation practice will have the following insight. You'll be sitting there, your legs will be killing you, your back will be killing you, you've got all sorts of physical distress, and it just grows and grows and grows. At some point, it's just utterly unbearable, but you just continue to sit through it, and then you notice the discomfort is one thing, your body's resistance to the discomfort is something else. And when those two come together, there is the experience of suffering. And when there's only the discomfort and your body doesn't fight moment by moment its own product, then there's only pain without suffering. Now, I know that the phrase pain without suffering seems oxymoronic. It seems to be a contradiction in terms. What do you mean? As soon as I have pain, I have suffering. No, as soon as you have pain, you have resistance to that pain, and those two are mixed together, you don't distinguish them, and you call that suffering. But a meditator can distinguish the two. And as soon as you start to notice that the pain is one thing and the resistance is something else, that immediately sets up a Skinnerian reconditioning of your subconscious circuits, the primitive levels of your body, which are probably down in the spinal cord, where the resistance starts. They unlearn their habit because they make a correlation. Oh, when we fight with ourselves, he, she suffers. They can't think those thoughts, but if they could, those deep circuits, that's what they'd say. Oh, we've got an insight. So the body gets trained out of the habit of fighting with its own physical discomfort that it creates. And so you have the empowering experience of physical pain without suffering. And you realize that does it hurt? Yes. Is it a problem? No. Will that be important to every person in this room at some point? Well, if you're in physical discomfort and we can't relieve the source of it through medicine, and we cannot palliate the symptoms through drugs, then you have a choice of either suffer or remember what I just told you, to put it in somewhat frank terms. And suffering, how big can pain get? How long can pain get? Big enough and long enough that the only joy in life is thinking of suicide. That's the human reality. That's how we're wired. To know that there's an alternative, huge. May not seem so relevant right now. This may even seem morose and melodramatic. But the fact is, I hope you'll remember this if you need it someday. That's physical pain. What about pleasure? Well, it turns out that there's a subtle resistance to pleasure also. A subtle kind of friction or holding, a moment-by-moment micro-fixation. The same phenomenon of viscosity within the flow of data in the nervous system. That same viscosity that turns physical, or for that matter, emotional, uncomfortable touch or feel, turns it into suffering. The same viscosity that turns uncomfortable body sensations into suffering prevents pleasant body sensations from delivering the fulfillment that is potentially there. So you discover, you notice that, oh, there's this subtle viscosity. I can only describe it metaphorically. It's something it's in our sensory processing, all of our senses, somatic, visual, and auditory. It is analogous to viscosity in a hydrodynamic system, or friction in a mechanical system, or perhaps impedance in an electrical system. I'm simply making an analogy here. I'm not saying that it is these physical variables, but it's something like that. And it causes unpleasant sensations to turn into suffering. Suffering equals pain multiplied by resistance. And fulfillment equals pleasure divided by resistance. So as the resistance goes down, the fulfillment goes up. There's something like this going on in our sensory circuits. You notice it as you meditate. By noticing it, it retrains it. That means that your body is now training itself out of the habit of suffering due to physical or emotional causes, and your body is training itself into the habit of being more sensorially fulfilled. Now, the reciprocal of this viscosity, the name for that in traditional Buddhist practice is equanimity. So you bring a quality called equanimity to your experience, and it elevates your somatic fulfillment and diminishes your sense of suffering in the body. So not only do you develop a quality of high concentration, but you also develop a quality of equanimity. And that deepens with time, and that spreads with time until it's affected all of your sensory experience. And you find that tiny pleasures are delivering huge satisfaction. And you find that really huge pains can be experienced with remarkably small sense of suffering. Now, it's still uncomfortable, so the pleasure and pain still fulfill their goal in nature to motivate and direct your behavior, but they no longer have the power to drive and distort your perceptions and behavior, so you have the best of both worlds. So that not only is your meditation going to develop an extraordinary, not only is it going to elevate your base level of concentration in daily life, but it's also going to elevate your base level of this other quality, this fluidity or conductivity, or whatever you want to call the reciprocal of the resistance, is going to grow. We call it equanimity. As your equanimity grows, your nervous system is not fighting with itself. Most people don't realize, but at a micro level, our information processing system is constantly, subtly fighting with itself. And in meditation, you notice that, and as soon as you notice it, that habit starts to automatically train away. So you're going to elevate concentration, you're going to elevate your equanimity, and then I mentioned a third variable, which is sensory clarity. So you might think of the concentration as like a tuner having the ability to lock onto a certain channel instead of being like, constantly losing. And you might think of the sensory clarity as, okay, now we're going to increase the baud rate through this system. System is your senses though, right? So now greater resolution, higher resolution screen, and we're going to diminish the impedance in this system. So the combination of good tuning qualities, low internal resistance, so very efficient use of energy and not heating up the wires so that you suffer or dissipate energy unduly. So we're going to lower the impedance. These are metaphors, right? You understand? I'm not claiming these are the actual physical variables, but they seem to behave this way. So we're going to lower the impedance in your sensory circuits. We're going to vastly raise the clarity, which will be the rate at which significant data is being processed. And we're going to give you good tuning qualities so you can lock and tune onto whatever you want. As the result of this, not only are you going to get insights into how to experience discomfort without suffering and how to experience pleasure with fulfillment, you're going to get an even deeper insight. Remember I said that it's like science. We're interested in things that are deep and also broad. So here's something that's very deep and very broad, which is you'll get an insight into how the sense of your own personal identity arises moment by moment. An actual paradigm that is describable in words that allows you to see how your I amness comes into existence moment by moment. So that sounds pretty mystical schmystical. So let me see if I can make it tangible to you. You remember we talked about image? What did I use the word image for? I said it was visual thinking, right? And I said talk, we use the word talk for auditory thinking. And I said we'd use the word feel for emotional type body sensations. So let's say that you are listening to music. Anybody here like music? Okay, I think most people like music. So you're going to listen to music, and I'm going to give you the following exercise. I'm going to give you the exercise to monitor the following three variables. At any given instant, as you're listening to the music, you might react to that music with a mental image triggered by the music. Or you might not have any mental images at all. You might react to the music with a mental comment, or there might not be any comment at all. You might have an emotional reaction to the music. If you like the music, a pleasant sensation in your body. If you don't like the music, an unpleasant sensation. So you might have a feel reaction to the music, or you might not have any reaction at all. Now, I'm making them binary variables, but of course, in fact, they're unit intervals, right? With the 0 and the 1 are just the extremes. But if we give ourselves a binary approximation, what do you do in science, right? A lot of times, the system is really too complicated. Okay, let's make some simplifying assumptions. So let's make the simplifying assumption that in any given instant, as you're listening to the external sound of the music, your internal state, you could either have image on or image off. Talk on, talk off. Feel on, feel off. So you've got 3 binary variables. Don't have to be a Google scientist to figure out how many possible states to the system, right? 8 states, 2 to the 3rd power. So I'm going to have you monitor. I'll do it now. I'm listening to this ambient sound, image and feel, talk, all 3, none, image and feel. I can do it with my eyes open just as well. Feel, none, feel. I'm monitoring my moment-by-moment reactions to the sound. Now, do you think that you could develop the ability to do this with a little bit of practice? Well, you can. I've taught it to as, like 6 years old. A 6-year-old kid can learn to do this, okay? Anybody can learn to do this. But here's the interesting thing. What do you do in science? You don't just do something once, you do it a lot of times, right? So let's say you did this a lot of times, and you did it for extended periods of time, like half an hour, and you did it a lot of times. So the laws of probability are going to be, oh, by the way, notice we're not trying to control the reactions, right? We're just monitoring. We're simply specifying which of the 8 states is arising reactively, moment by moment, to the sound. But if we did this experiment a lot of times, you'd start to notice some patterns. You would notice that sometimes you get 2 or 3 activated at once, and every once in a while you get no activation at all. Just spontaneously, there's just sound without any feel, image, talk arising in that moment. Now, as you're paying attention to what these different states are like in your subjective experience, you'll start to notice that when there's no feel, image, talk reaction, there's only the sound of the music, and you are the sound of the music, and there's no observer. There's no perceived observer, listener rather. There's no perceived listener at all. For that moment, you as an identity disappear, or rather your identity becomes elastic and melts into the sound itself for a moment. Then feel, image, talk arise again, and you have a big smile, and in your talk space you hear yourself saying, oh my God, the boundary between inside and outside just disappeared. I became the music. Now, of course, at that instant, you're back into feel, image, talk reaction. So you're no longer the music, but you're having an aha moment. Then if you drop that, okay, and just observe again, then at some point, once again, you'll have that experience of no reaction at all. There's just the music, and I am the music. This is starting to give you an insight into how your sense of self arises, based on direct experience, not based on anybody's theory. The Buddha said that his teaching was ehipassiko. Ehipassiko in the language of his time meant come see for yourself. Ehi means come, passa means see. Come see for yourself. Do this experiment if you want. Do it enough times, and you'll see, oh my God, there are times when the self doesn't arise. Other times it arises strongly. In general, the stronger the feel, image, talk reaction, the more sense of I amness. So now what are we talking about? We're talking about a vector. We're talking about a phase space here, the space of subjective experience. At any given moment seems to involve a certain amount of X, a certain amount of Y, and a certain amount of Z. And guess what? The images tend to appear sort of around here. The talk tends to be here. And the feel, of course, is in your body, but may tend to center here or here. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about monitoring your thoughts and emotions, your desires and reactions, your entire sense of I amness. I have now given you a paradigm that would allow you to say how much of what, when, and where, interacting in what ways, and if you wanted to, changing at what rates, as a function of time. It's a kind of, as a function of time and space. So we're able to speak in this very precise language subjectively about, we've now got a language that sort of sounds like the language of science, because I'm talking about variables, I'm talking about levels of activation. Each variable has a sort of location in space. They're changing as a function of time. And it turns out, although I won't have time to go into it here, that in Buddhist practice, the major theme is you become interested in how everything is changing, the rates of change, which is, in a sense, to develop an internal differential operator on this vector space. Okay? And it turns out that your whole sense of what's molding this field of subjective experience comes about through monitoring the rates of change, so that you get a sense that there is a sort of force. And in East Asia, that's called qi, and in other traditions, it's called prana, and so forth. But you actually detect it through watching rates of change, just as the derivatives are so important in the world of the natural world, time derivatives, fluxions, as Newton called them. Turns out that's like a huge theme here too in Buddhist practice. So look what's in the mindfulness practice, which is the one that emphasizes this sort of divide and conquer that I'm describing to you. Look at what the themes are here. The themes are divide and conquer. We have this complex system called the subjective world. No one seems to be able to get a handle on it from any theoretical or practical point of view. Well, let's look at these very simple variables: auditory thinking, visual thinking, emotional body. Let's watch their activation levels. Let's watch their interactions. And most importantly, let's watch their rates of change as they arise and pass away. The rates of change in Buddhism are called anicca, impermanence. And if you study anything about Buddhist meditation, you'll see that this is a huge theme. So what I'm presenting to you is a model of mindfulness. So any form of meditation is going to involve sensory clarity. It's going to involve high concentration. That's the lowest common denominator. Most forms of meditation, if they take place in traditional religions, will have an equanimity component that's related to a concept of the soul being purified. But in Buddhism, the sign that the soul is being purified is that your suffering diminishes and your fulfillment goes up. So that's the equanimity component. Then what the Buddha discovered, which was unique to his take on meditation, was the clarity component. Oh, we can take this complicated thing called the self and break it down into its atoms and see how those atoms interact to produce the illusion of limited identity. And when that emergent property or illusion of limited identity is seen through, then what happens to your identity? You notice when you listen to the sound, there was no feel, image, talk. Your identity sort of became the sound. Your identity could become the person that you're looking at. It could be anything. What happens to your identity when this insight arises is that it becomes a paradoxical identity. Instead of being a limited identity that's limited to a certain mind and a certain body, your identity now has that, your original mind and body is still your home base, but instead of being a prison where you have to live all the time, it's now a home, and you can leave and come back. And when you leave, you become anything, everything, and the nothing that is the source of anything and everything. And so you have what might be described as an elastic identity, or what might be described as a paradoxical identity, or what is traditionally called an enlightened identity. And that's, in 50 minutes, the big picture of meditation worldwide, Buddhist meditation in specific, and specifically the mindfulness practice. And it's my conjecture that because the nuts and bolts of mindfulness is, with regards to our experience of body-mind, how much of what, when and where, interacting in what ways, and changing at what rates. That's what mindfulness trains you to track in your own sensory experience. Well, to me, that sounds a lot like science. That sounds like an internally generated fMRI of sensory experience. And because of that, I cannot help but think that if we get the senior mindfulness masters who can track this kind of stuff, you notice, okay, I'm ready to go. The drop of a hat. Feel, image, talk, none, okay? That's a skill. It's just there. I can track it anytime. My whole, even in the middle of a talk like that, I'm talking to you, it's going on autopilot. My idea is, if we can get people that have been trained in these skills at high levels, get them to the people that are imaging the effects of this, then we get the best of both worlds. We get the quantified empirical data, and we see how that correlates to the person's internal experience. And this would then allow us at some time in the future to develop a new paradigm for what happens in meditation. Right now, there are dozens and dozens of forms of meditation, and my expression would be, and each one of them claims to tell you why they're the best one. I would say, as a professional in the field, that all forms of meditation worldwide are roughly equally ineffective. Do you hear me? They're roughly equally bad, meaning that they take a lot of time and effort. They do deliver the goods, though, and delivering the goods is very important. How important? Well, just wait till the next time you're in physical or emotional distress and you can't relieve the situation, and you can't cover it over with drugs, or you don't want to cover it over with recreational or medical drugs. What are you going to do? Well, there's something you can do. So it's very relevant stuff to the nitty-gritty of human life. But my idea is that because it takes a long time and it's hard to do, even though the results are, for the people that do it, I mean, if you ask me, okay, I'll give you a choice. You can live one day as you are, as I am today, knowing what I know, and I have to die tonight. Or I can live the rest of my life and have millions of dollars and be famous and whatever, but I'm not going to allow you to live your life knowing what you know. Okay? You take anybody that's meditated for 40 years, the way I have, and ask them, you want to live one day knowing what you know as a meditator and die, or live the rest of your life, but you're not allowed to have a meditator's consciousness. No one will hesitate. Give me one day with the meditator's consciousness. That's incomparably better than a lifetime of ordinary pleasure that human beings would have. So that's how big it is for those few that are willing to put in the time and effort. The problem is the great majority of human beings are not willing to put in the time and effort. That means that from my perspective, when I look out at the world, I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the human condition. Because I know for sure, based on my own experience, what a human being can come to experience as human life. I know what can be with a certain amount of training. And the actual amount of training, about a half an hour a day, and then maybe 4 hours of intensive practice per month, kept up for your life. As a householder, that's actually enough. That may not seem like a lot in terms of time. Actually, in terms of time, it isn't a lot. But in terms of people organizing their schedules so that they actually prioritize and do that, it is a lot. So most people will not make those priorities, even though it's not that big a deal. So most people will not live the way they could have lived. As a senior Buddhist meditation teacher, I look for the solution to this, not in trying to convert people into Buddhism, but rather I look to science. I look to science to give a radical new interpretation of what happens to us when we're successful meditators. I'm looking for a paradigm shift that I do not think will come about through any advanced meditator simply looking into his or herself using the methods of the past. I think we need to bring a new methodology in, which would be the method of science, neuroscience. Let's ask, okay, what happens at enlightenment? And get a scientific model. Now, I'm not the only Buddhist that calls for this. As when people say, well, you're going to secularize and take all the mystery out of enlightenment. No, I say we're going to take the mist out of enlightenment. And if that means secularization so that the masses of humanity can live as big as they need to live, then okay, then it will be a secular enlightenment, but it will still be deeply, deeply spiritual. It just won't have the language of religion anymore. So I look to science to come up with a new paradigm, an actual mathematical scientific model. I gave you some approximate math that I'm sort of hypothesizing from the inside, but no one's ever tested things like that from the outside. But because the basic method of mindfulness is quantitative, it's asking for tracking variables in terms of how much of what, when, and where, changing at what rate. And because Western science is designed exactly to do that, it seems to me that there's a natural meeting point for these two sciences. And that would give birth to a new science, a true science of enlightenment that would be acceptable to any scientific thinking person in the world, because there'd be empirical data and mathematical equations to back it up. But you know what happens with new science? Comes new technology. And so as a meditation teacher, my fondest hope is that in 100 years, meditation is obsolete. Do you understand? That seems very radical, right? I devote my life to spreading meditation. I would like to see it obsolete. Obsolete in the sense that that horse and buggy is obsolete because a new technology does the same job better. So that, you know, Einstein had his happiest thought. It was the equivalence of a gravitational field and an accelerating frame allowed him to, it was the big breakthrough that allowed for general relativity. So he called that his happiest thought. His happiest thought was when he realized that those two were equivalent, and that would be a whole basis for general relativity. So I'll tell you what my happiest thought as a 21st century scientifically oriented Buddhist teacher is. My happiest thought is there are many deep and significant things about enlightenment that no human being knows at this time. Not the greatest masters of the past, not the greatest living Zen masters, not even the Buddha himself. There are things to learn about it. And those things can only be learned from bringing the light of science to it. And when we do, we will, accompanying that will be a new technology that will essentially make classical liberation or enlightenment available to any consenting adult on the planet, basically. So anybody that understands what they're getting into and wants it could take a course in a junior college, let's say a community college. It would give them certain very simple attentional training, a little conceptual framework, and then there would be technological boosts of some sort that we can't imagine at this point, that at the end of, say, a 6 months class, you have had the experience of what's called stream entry or Kensho enlightenment, and that's an integrated experience for you. And so that instead of having a few thousand enlightened people or maybe 10,000 enlightened people on the planet, we have millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, enough to make a critical mass to change the course of human history towards the positive. That's my sort of messianic view. I do not for a moment claim that this is what's going to happen, okay? Like Yogi Berra, I don't make predictions about, especially about the future, okay? Think of all the great scientists you know that have made predictions about the future, okay? Like John von Neumann, thinking that computers would stratify society because only rich people could have them. Did you know that? He thought that there'd be a horrible effect of computers. The inventor of the von Neumann concept of a computer, right? Von Neumann. He was totally wrong about the social impact. In fact, 180. So I could be totally wrong. I don't claim this will happen, but it is not hard for me to imagine that it could happen, that science and spirituality could cooperate in the lines I'm describing. And I am done. I'm out of time. Thank you for listening. And those of you that still have some time, I would like questions. Particularly, I like challenging questions. I like to be put on the spot. I like to get the questions that you have not been satisfied with answers so far, or questions where you think you can put me on the spot. I like questions. So I will open it up for anything that anyone would like to ask. Yeah, maybe Meng.
Maybe we stop the talk here and then.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, because we have to do the other room.
Sitting and then we can do the question.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I realize I'm behind schedule. So we're going to start a meditation in a little while, or right away, rather. Yeah. And that's going to be downstairs in what room? Cayenne? Yeah. So if you have questions, come down there and we'll answer your questions and do some meditation. Thank you. And thank you.